Well, as project managers, we get work done through teams, right? That's how we do things. But just because you put people into a group doesn't necessarily mean we're going to work as teams. Would you buy that? Right? You can assemble people in a group, but have you ever had this situation where you're sitting across the table from someone, maybe a different side of the business, and perhaps they have a different agenda? Maybe they're not as excited about this project, or they have concerns, or maybe it feels like they're trying to derail things, perhaps. This happens, and that's something that we have to be able to deal with. So, to start today out, we thought it'd be kind of fun to say, you know what? Let's try to simulate this. So we're going to do a little thing called the spy game to kick it off today. You're going to spend a lot of time sitting, listening to speakers. We're going to get you involved right up front here. So this is how it's going to work. On your table, do you see a group number? Okay, that's the easiest part of the exercise. Do you see the group number? All right, that's good. All right. So what you're going to do in just a little bit, you're going to go with other people with the same group number on the table. We've got groups 1 through 5 and 6 through 10. Okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to go towards that area, and there's going to be a chapter volunteer who's going to pass out 2 things to you. One is, it's a full-page document that's folded, and inside that is going to be a word problem that you as a team need to solve. Okay? So you're going to have to solve that. And they're also going to give you a little piece of paper. Now, this is a really important one, because on that little piece of paper, you have to be very sleuthy with it. You have to actually open it very carefully, not let anyone else see it, because it's going to say either you are a spy or you are not a spy. Okay? So here's how it works. If you're not a spy, your whole goal is to help your team get the correct answer to the word problem. Okay? So you're there to help, because we're going to have a friendly competition here, and the table that gets the problem correct is going to win. But if your little piece of paper says you are not a spy, if you are a spy, if it says you are a spy, this is where you have to really get sleuthy, because your goal is to get the team to come up with the wrong answer, but not get caught. Okay? So if it says you are a spy, you want to just get them off track to not get the right answer in the time allocated. Okay? The winning table, the winning group, gets the correct answer to the word problem, and there are no spies left in your group. So what does that mean? Let's say that you think, so Rex here. Let's say you think Rex is a spy, okay? Keep an eye on him. I know this guy, okay? So let's say you think Rex is a spy. You go, I think Rex is a spy. You can accuse someone in your group. Say, I think this person's a spy. Now, you don't say whether you are or not. You just look innocent, and a simple show of hands on your table. Do you think Rex is a spy or not a spy? If it's anything close to a majority, Rex is off the group, and if you're voted off your group, you just come right up front, right here, okay? Just come up. I'll keep you happy. And here's the deal. You do not want a single spy left in your group. You might have up to 5 spies in your group. So, y'all are pretty nice in Greenville here. So don't just sit back and play nice. If you think someone's a spy, you get them off your team. Otherwise, there's no way you're going to win. Got it? So you're going to get the word problem. You'll go to your area. You'll get your word problem. You'll get that little piece of paper. Keep it hidden so they don't know. Solve the problem. And when it seems like most teams have kind of got it figured out, we'll come back, we'll find out what the answer is, and I'm going to interview some spies. It's going to be a lot of fun. So if you're group 1 through 5, you're going to go over there. There are volunteers waiting for you. If you're group 6 through 10, you're going to go over there. Go ahead and get up out of your seat and head over there. Thanks. All right, so first things first. I know a bunch of project managers want to know what the right answer is. Okay, so, but let's just have a little fun with it. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and you shout out what you think the right answer is from your table. And if you don't agree with what your table came up with, you can be a rebel and give what you think it is and what they did, all right? So I'm going to count to 3 and then shout out what you think the correct dollar amount is. 1, 2, 3. 8. I heard more 8s back here than I did here. Guess what? The correct answer is $8. So give yourself a hand. Give yourself a hand. Okay. Yeah, no, okay. See, they're still fighting about it right here. Now, what I'd like to do is interview some of our accused. Now, first of all, this is an esteemed group of people. Give a hand for our spies up here. Yeah. Accused spies, okay. So I'm interested in some examples of why you got accused. As best you can tell, why did you get accused? Anybody? What's that?
Because I have an opinion.
You have an opinion. Well, let's make sure that never happens. All right. Yes, sir.
I said $8.
Yep. And who's right now? Huh? Yeah. All right. Jeannie, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So why did you get accused?
Because I was writing down what they were saying. I was taking notes for them.
Yeah. So the message here is never be the one taking minutes. They're always suspecting what you're writing down, right? Yes. All right. Well, yes. Yeah. What would you say?
I was going around asking questions.
Right.
And they
Just
said, "Oh,
just asking questions. Right. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
I accused 2 other folks, and I got kicked out myself.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Your volunteer suggested I could be a spy, and the group decided I was a spy.
Yeah, they just decided, yep. That's how it works, yeah. Any other thoughts about why you got accused? Okay, yeah.
Had a different answer than 2 other people that agreed in the group.
And so they kind of ganged up on you? Well, that's one way to get your way.
And her answer was $8.
Yeah,
And yours was $8. And what was theirs?
28.
Losers. Yeah. Okay. And you had, yeah.
I didn't have an answer, but I asked the group to question how they got to theirs, and they didn't like that.
Clearly a spy who wants clarity on the process. Okay. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Because actually at this point, we don't know if they are spies or not. And we don't know if we have spies lurking. In fact, we have some blue shirts who might be spies back there. Now, the truth is we don't know. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to count to 3. And when I say 3, raise your hand if you're a spy, whether you're out here or up here, okay? 1, 2, 3. Oh, you were totally set up. There's not a spy in the house. There's not a spy in the house. Every one of those cards said there is no spy. Hey, give it up for these guys again, would you? You can go ahead and back to your seats. All right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to lean over to some people on your table here and say, wait, how can this be that we had like 24 honest people up front being accused and there wasn't a spy in the house, all right? And actually, more importantly, what I'm interested in is what are some lessons that we can kind of take from that to apply to our teams? You got a couple minutes to have a conversation around your table here. Go ahead and get started. All right. I'm interested in some examples of how you think you can apply something from that. Anybody have an example? Just raise your hand. What can you take away from that, or an observation?
Your answer is wrong.
What's that?
Your answer is wrong still.
Yeah, the answer is still wrong, yes. See, that's what I love about this. I've done this with PhD scientists. I've done this with elementary school students. But by the way, guess who most consistently gets the right answer? All right, there's something to be said for that. But the people who have the hardest time letting go of the number $28 is project managers. So, for the record. It's all about money. It's all about money and the right number. All right. What's a lesson we can take away from something like this? Yes, sir.
Assume positive intent.
Yeah, okay. So he's saying assume positive intent. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit later in my keynote about the best boss I ever hated to work for. And her name was Cindy. She was a brilliant boss, but I just didn't enjoy it. But she'd always say, assume innocence. But she didn't really do that. Yeah? So I think we'd all, what's your name?
Rich.
Rich? Yeah. So I think we would all agree that assuming positive intent is a really good idea. But there are times where hey, Rick, you want to be a mic runner? Is that what you're doing?
That's what I was going to do.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah. So
I got the mic.
Is that a mistake? No, just kidding. But assuming positive intent, although it can be difficult, is really important on teams. Okay? All right, what else? What else comes to mind? Yes?
Don't get distracted by the fact that there is a spy, but concentrate more on how you can get the right answer.
Aha, yeah, right. Yeah, so in fact, in some ways you are set up because I'm like, there is a spy. You can have up to 5 spies, right? I did say up to 5 spies, so I wasn't lying. Could be up to 5 spies. Well, not much anyway. But do you know how easy it is to start thinking that person is and just fill in the blank. That person's a jerk. That person is a bully. That person is somebody who's out to get us. That person is out to throw this project under a bus. And what happens as soon as you start thinking that, you find all the data to support what you're thinking about it, okay? So just being aware of that. We'll talk about that in just a little bit, okay? All right? Let's go for one more example. Yes, sir?
How does the person that knows the answer is $8 convince the rest of them to believe it?
Well, there's going to be a soft skills discussion this afternoon. There's going to be actually in the conflict that Eric's going to do at 11, there's going to be some good content to help you. But I'm telling you, there's times where you're like, I know the right answer. I'm not talking about the exercise. I know the right answer to this problem we're trying to solve as a team. But it's like, how can I get them to be able to get this? This is why influence is one of the most important things for us to develop over time, is to be able to do that in a way that's not just elbowing your way to get the answer. Because that's, in fact, a number of people said up here when I was asking them, what is it that made it difficult? Well, one person said, I asked us to question the process that we're going through, which is a brilliant thing to ask. Let's question the process. That's like a core part of Agile. Let's keep, real quick, let's double check. Is there something in this process that we can improve so we get better? And she's voted off, right? Yeah, she's voted off. Well, we're going to talk about a number of things today that's going to help you not answer word problems, but answer the problems that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Because often the biggest problem we have to solve is not what is our critical path. The biggest problems are more on the people side. I want to tell you about something. This actually happened. This actually happened in my hometown, Chicago, at Chicago O'Hare Airport within the last year. There's a flight that's supposed to be heading out east. It had been delayed for a number of hours. It's still at the gate, but people are kind of getting cranky because there hasn't been a whole lot of communication about what's going on. And if you sat on a plane for a couple hours and you don't know, are you going to get home or what's going on? You know there's weather out east. People are starting to get a little disgruntled. So they look up the aisle, and out of the cockpit comes the pilot with the PA in his hand and reportedly says something like this. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're about ready to finally take off. I know it's been a little while. I just need to let you know we're going to be going through some bad weather. It's going to be really bad. We're going to be flying through thunderstorms and tornadoes. It's going to get really bumpy, so I recommend you get to know the people you're sitting next to. Boom. Walks back into the cockpit. So, I mean, seriously, if you're in this plane, what are you thinking right now?
How can I get out?
Yeah. Well, actually, we don't have to speculate because social media lit up from at least the people that are on there of like, because the people are saying he seemed angry. He seemed upset about this. You don't want a pilot who's having a bad day, right? No. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that it made the news. All kinds of outlets were covering this. Now, I just wonder if that pilot was here, because he probably is looking for a job. But if he was here, I wonder if we just put the mic up and said, so tell me what you were thinking when you said that. I wonder, in fact, I would almost bet what he'd say is, I didn't say we're going to fly through tornadoes. I didn't say we're going to go through thunderstorms. Everyone's just taking it way out of proportion. That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. I bet that's what he would say. That's not what I meant. You ever have this happen at a different scale for you? You send the email, and people are just getting all upset, or they thought you meant something different. This happens to us. You're like, that's not what I meant. How could you possibly think that's what I meant by that? Whether it's an email, whether it's just something you said in a meeting, they just take it all wrong. And all of a sudden you're catching flack for saying something that, that's not what I meant. This happens all the time. And can I just say, as we kick off a day of learning, and I can't wait to learn from the other speakers that are here as well, the way we communicate can make all the difference. We can create calm and get a sense of direction and buy-in, or we can create confusion, and lack of clarity can make it so much more difficult for us to deliver. Let's talk about communication. Let me show you just a simple example. Sometimes it's big when a pilot says something like that. This is an example. All of our kids have played competitive soccer, and for my daughter's team, my daughter, this particular daughter is 17 now, and the coach, there's going to be a change of coach. So this is at the end of the spring season, and we get an email from who's going to be the new coach, Coach Shar, and just basically saying, hey, looking forward to coaching your daughters. So I know Coach Shar a little bit. Some of my older sons had Coach Shar as their coach. So I thought, well, this is a good opportunity for me to reply and just say hi and kiss the coach's butt. Okay, so anyway, I'm on my phone. So this is what I reply. So this side of the room decidedly got it faster than this side of the room. But what happened there? Yeah. Did you ever have your mobile device change a word or two for you? Yeah. Now here is how Coach Shar responded. And thank you very much. I'm sure you meant leading, not leaving. All right. But here's the deal. What if this would have gone to the head of a new division, somebody that I didn't know? I think there'd be a lot less LOL at this point, right? I think it's very decidedly true that could be the case. And so we just have to be so careful. When we talk about communication, a lot of times what we see is a typical sender-receiver model, right? We've got this person on this side who's got this message to get across, and this person on this side hopefully is going to get it. And there are so many opportunities for people to not get it. Let's talk about some breakdowns here. For example, the way that you encode a message. For those of you that pursued your PMP, you maybe remember some numbers around this. Others of you may have seen it in previous training. There's a guy out of UCLA, Albert Mehrabian, who took a look at communication, and what he did was he broke things down into words, body language, and vocal tone. Do you remember hearing this before? What % of our communication would you guess comes down to words? Somebody shout out a number. So I heard 20, I think I heard, was that 80? 60, okay. All right, what Mehrabian found was a number notably smaller, 7. Okay. Now we could probably put together a case for either body language or vocal tone being next, but what he found was 55 and 38. And so the way this is normally taught is it's not what you say, it's, which is exactly wrong. Because if I go up with this gentle body language and kind vocal tone and I say to my boss, you're an idiot, I'm still fired, right? Right? So I gotta tell you, this one always bugged me because I always felt like communication words has to be more than 7%. So as David mentioned, I host the People and Projects podcast that if you're looking for PDUs, we have over 103 hours of free PDUs, all right? And so a guest I've had a couple times is a guy named Dr. Nick Morgan. And he writes a lot about communication and trust. And he goes, no. What Mehrabian found is not just that words are only 7%. What Mehrabian found is when these three are not aligned. Think about that. When they're not aligned, what do we believe? Right here. So let's say Cindy walks up to me and says, hey, Andy, how's that project going? I go, great. Okay? Now, I'm exaggerating, but what did my words say?
Not too good.
Well, no, my words said it's going great, but my body language and vocal tone were screaming that something's up. Can I tell you, just that one thing can make a difference on how you communicate. And if you're trying to do a better job of understanding, watch more than, don't just pay attention to the words they're saying. Watch the body language. Watch the eye contact. Watch how they're saying it. You can get a better understanding maybe of what they're really saying. And if you want to influence your team, you want to influence a boss, make sure they are aligned. My personality style is really laid back, and so when I'm trying to tell somebody they need to step up, I smile too much, and I take a little bit of edge off it, and they walk out thinking they're a rock star. All right? And so if you want to improve your ability to be understood, get those aligned. Now, that's how we encode it. There's also an issue on how we transmit. I think it's fair to say most of us are pretty high email culture, using some sort of messaging. Okay? Would you say that's true? Yeah, okay. So of those three, words, body language, and vocal tone, which do you get when you send, let's say, some sort of messaging? You only get words, and I don't care how many emojis you use, okay? It's going to be really easy for people to not get it. So a good lesson on this one is the more sensitive the issue, the richer the medium. Think about that. The more sensitive the issue, the richer the medium. What would you say is the richest medium? Just shout it out. Like face-to-face. In fact, maybe face-to-face one-on-one, followed by face-to-face in a group, followed by video if you have access to video, because you can watch body language on that. So if you're running a WebEx or a Link or GoToMeeting, turn the cameras on, that's going to be a richer meeting than if it's just a conference call. Followed by maybe phone one-on-one, followed by conference call. Do you see how email isn't very high in the whole food chain? Yet that's one of the first things we want to whip out. Why? It's easy. I mean, it does have a way of showing up. And if you have people all over potentially the world, you can send it to. So there's all kinds of reasons why we want to do that. Can I just encourage you, the more sensitive the issue, the richer the medium. If it's not a very sensitive thing, just tweet it, right? But if this is a highly sensitive thing, pull out a richer medium or the richest medium you have available, okay? And then, well, we did that, but then there's the decoding. So we tried to do everything right. We tried to align our words, body language, vocal tone, use the richest medium we have available to us. The breakdown over here is never underestimate people's ability to not get it, okay? Now, I don't mean it doesn't show up in their inbox. I mean, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. So what are some ways to check to see if people get it? So double check with them. Okay, what else? Ask. Yeah, some sort of question. Now watch your body language and vocal tone. If you go, all right, what do we agree to here? It's not going to work for you. But something along the lines of, hey, you know, we talked about a lot of stuff here. Just to make sure we're on the same page, how would you summarize in your own words? Okay? Don't make it a yes or no. So, see, I think the problem I've seen with too many times with project managers, we think that by keeping people informed, we're keeping them satisfied. You know what I'm saying? Well, it was in the email, but maybe they didn't read the email. Or maybe they read the email, but they still didn't get it. Let me just give you a simple example of this. This is a texting conversation between me and a relatively new taxi driver for me. Okay? So check it out. I say, hello from Lake Zurich. I live in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. You know, would you by chance be available for 3:20 p.m.? You know, pick up to O'Hare. I put my name just in case I wasn't in his contacts. What does he say? Sure, yes, no problem, great, thanks. Seems like we're all good. Okay? So it's approximately 3:20 in the afternoon. There's no driver in my driveway, so I pick up my phone like, hey, you almost here? And he goes, I'm here. Where is he? You're exactly right. Do you have this driver here in Greenville? Because that's exactly where he was. He was at O'Hare. Can you please help me? How can he possibly think I'm at O'Hare? Read that. From Lake Zurich to O'Hare. It seems intuitively obvious to me, of where I'm at, right? So can you help me out here? How can he possibly think that I'm at O'Hare? Yeah, say it again. I'm like, hello from Lake Zurich, like I'm Andy from Lake Zurich. But that doesn't, to him, that might mean I'm not there, okay? Yeah, good, all right, what else? How can he possibly think I'm at O'Hare?
Yeah, pick up.
Yeah, what was yours? Right, yeah, so I'm assuming it's the same in South Carolina, but in Illinois, it's illegal to text and drive. But I don't consider myself any expertise in this, but I've read enough on it that texting laws make no changes to the accident rate because people still do it, they just hold it down further, right? So, yeah, it's actually not funny, but you know, it's true. And so what is he doing? If he does a quick scan, what does he see? Pick up, O'Hare, 3:20. And you just fill in the gaps, okay? Now, here's the deal. I feel like I went way out of my way here to be really clear. And we'd never say it this way, but sometimes we think the more I write, the more they're going to get it, right? But even as I say that, it's obvious that's not true. It's inversely proportional. The more you write in those meeting minutes, in that requirements document, in whatever it is going to be, the more you write, the less they're going to read it, the more they're going to skim it. And what people do is they just kind of fill in the gaps. I could just see him going, 3:20, I'm driving to O'Hare right now. This is great. I won't have to wait for 2 hours for a ride. This will be perfect, right? He fills in the gaps. It's referred to, psychologists have an interesting term for it, the illusion of transparency. I wrote this with the illusion of transparency. That it's like people can read my mind. We act. Now, I never say to my wife, well, honey, why didn't you just read my mind, right? That's not a winning proposition. But we act as if people can read our mind, okay? So here's the social science experiment. We're going to try it with you. You need to pair up with somebody, okay? If you have an odd number of people on your table, lean over to the table next to you. You need to pair up with somebody. I can promise you this is going to be easy. You're going to pair, but you do need to pair up with somebody. The person out of your pair who's closest to me needs to think of a song, okay? David tried to seed some musicians from Canada. Just think of a song. Now, don't tell the person what the song is. Don't tell the person what the song is. But you need to think of a song. And just a little bit, I'm going to ask you to tap out the song. You have to tap it out. You can't head bob. You can't lip sync. You just have to tap out the song. The other person's got 30 seconds to figure out what your song is. Go, go. Let me put you out of your misery here. Did anybody get it? All right. I will say, what song did you guys do? You did 2 songs. Overachievers, I see. Yeah. Jingle Bells does pretty well. I did a session with the McCaskey family. If you are a NFL football fan, you may know that they own the Bears. Half the room did Bear Down Chicago Bears. It ruined the exercise. But Happy Birthday usually does pretty well. These guys did Wild Thing, and he got it. Okay. But most people don't. Most people don't get it. In fact, I've let it go longer before, and after a while, the person doing the tapping is like, this is so easy, right? But the person listening is like, woo, they just don't get it. And actually, here's the lesson. Why is it that it's so easy for the tapper? Because the tapper hears the music in their head, okay? Like when I have headphones on, I do sound like Beyonce. I'm telling you, I do. But here's the deal. When I was at home, I knew I was in my living room. It's intuitively obvious to me that he should pick me up here. But it's not obvious to him. He can't read my mind. This whole thing of the illusion of transparency is so critical. In fact, how about this? In our communication from here on out, let's assume people won't get it. Not because people are idiots, generally speaking. It's because they can't read our mind. They can't read our mind. And so they're just as busy as you are. All the emails are going to be piling up today while you're here. Actually, let's not think about that, right? But my point is, they have those same pressures that you have. Let's assume people won't get it, so we get more intentional. Now, by the way, if it's not a big deal, if there's a lot of trust, you don't have to be as careful on that one nearly as much as, well, this is going to go across the organization to a wide group of stakeholders, okay? So those are just some simple lessons. This is a good model. The sender-receiver model is good. There's feedback. It's a good model, but it feels so incomplete in many ways, because it's often more difficult than this. This is Doug Stone, co-author of a fabulous book called Thanks for the Feedback, and also Difficult Conversations. He was on episode 108, and it's a great book on, we've spent years trying to help people give feedback more effectively, and we still stink at it, so let's get better at receiving feedback. But one of the things that he says in the book here is, difficult conversations, when you're trying to interact with people, almost always is not about the facts. It's about all this other stuff, these perceptions and interpretations and values, that's often what's going on. And so there's this, if we go back to this model, the thing is, let's say that we've got Cindy over on the left and me over on the right. Well, do you think it's reasonable that Cindy has some stories she's telling herself about me and some perceptions that maybe I'm just way too laid back for, at this point, as a guy who started as the software developer and was promoted into management because he was a reasonably good software developer, so surely he must be a good manager, right? That whole halo effect, which is the kiss of death for a lot of teams. I eventually got to be a vice president of systems, and you know what? In my heart, I was still a developer in many ways. You know, in my heart. So I could see Cindy saying, he's trying to be way too technical. She's got all kinds of biases going on there, I'm sure. And guess what? I do too. You know, you can just imagine the things I said to myself about Cindy. Oh, does it have to be that hard? What a jerk. Huh? I'm sure it was nothing worse than that. But you know, that happens. We have these biases. This is Dan Shapiro. He is the guy at Harvard who founded the Harvard International Negotiation Program, wrote a fabulous book called Negotiating the Non-Negotiable. And what he says is, when you're trying to have these difficult sort of conversations, like how can I get this message across to the other person? Once again, it's clearly not just about facts, but underneath, not even below emotions. Well, a lot of times what's going on is it's getting at someone's identity. Now here's what I mean by this. There's a model, it's referred to as SCARF, and it's an acronym. There's a place on the back of your gold sheet here if you want to take any notes on this, okay? As well as the references to the books that I'm talking about. SCARF is from a guy named David Rock at the Neuro Leadership Institute. I don't want to exaggerate, but I don't think there's a week that goes by that I don't refer to SCARF in some ways. Here's how it works. It's an acronym. The S stands for status, which it says that basically the way that he would say it, the brain works, is that we move towards those things that are rewards. We move away from things that are threats. And we'd like to think that we're kind of evolved past this, but you know what often happens? It's almost like we've got this thing going on in our mind. You meet somebody, are they more important than me? Do they have a more important job than me? Like we play this game in our mind, whether they're even aware of it or not, that if in fact someone does something to reduce your status, it can create conflict, it can create tension, okay? So, for example, let's say that you're in a meeting and you say something and your boss goes, okay, and then moves on, right? Now, they didn't go, you're an idiot. You know, they didn't say that. But sometimes even subtle little things can drop someone's status. So here's the deal. When you communicate sometime and you go, I can't believe they're acting like that. I can't believe they thought I was going to do that. You might have just kicked them in the S, so to speak. And anytime you kick somebody in the S, you drop their status, even in small little ways. It's going to create a problem in communication. It's going to create conflict. You have to be careful about it. So how do you avoid that? I'm on a mission, and I fail at this regularly, but raise the status of the people around you. Think about it. Raise the status of the people around you. How can you truly celebrate when something good happens to them? How can you get them talking? One of the biggest problems right now is conversational narcissism. That we're just talking about ourselves all the time. Don't. Get them talking. Have them spend far more time talking. That is a way to raise the status. The pleasure centers of the brain light up when people are talking about themselves, similarly to what they measure with other things that we think of as pleasurable, okay? So get people talking about themselves. Anything that you can do to raise the status of the people around you is going to help. I'm telling you, you look at a lot of conflict, it's the S. But the C stands for certainty. The brain craves certainty. What it means is we're scanning the horizon constantly. If all of a sudden there was like a really loud sound in here, you'd be like, what was that? Because that wasn't expected. But you're used to the ambient noise in here. We want certainty. And think about from project managers, there's all kinds of things we can do to create certainty. This is the process we're going to use. These are roles and responsibilities. Here are the stakes in the ground. They're going to get us there. We can create certainty. But if your communication does anything to threaten certainty, where like people are like, what was that? What am I doing now? What are we doing now? It's going to create problems of you being understood. Okay? So do everything we can to create certainty. The A stands for autonomy. We like choices. We like choices, or at least the perception of choices. So when you're communicating, can you find a way to not say, the answer's 8, and if you don't agree with me, you're a bunch of idiots, right? Right? So that pretty much stomped on status and autonomy. Okay? But anything you can do to provide some sense of choice, that's going to help. The R is relatedness, And this would just get to the point that we're more tribal than often what we realize. Like right here, today, we are a tribe of project management professionals. Not necessarily I'm saying PMPs, but as people that have a passion for project management. That's a tribe. But you know what? We have other tribes in here. You have the BMW tribe, or the Fluor tribe, or the Benefits Focus tribe, or you've got all kinds of mini tribes there that you reserve tables for each other. Okay? We have tribes of those who are certified who aren't, those who are wearing blue shirts or black shirts or not. We have all kinds of tribes. So here's the deal. Something that I find can be really helpful when it comes to improving your effectiveness, do everything you can to be part of multiple tribes. Because we're in a culture right now that is more tribal than ever. And it's very easy to fall into that trap. Try to be part of multiple tribes. Here's a practical thing. If you go out to lunch with basically the same people almost every day, there are people who don't feel like they're part of that tribe. They're outsiders. And when people are outsiders, they act weird. So if you can do something to try to bring people under your wing, make them feel part of the tribe, that'll help. The F is fairness. That I've got a CEO friend who, whenever his kids go, but Dad, that's not fair, he goes, hey, you know what? We don't live at the fair. Which, try that on your kids. I think it's pretty good. But you know, the truth is it's not fair, but for the people around us, if there can be at least perceived procedural justice, that the way we went about this, when you're communicating it, did it seem like you at least took their input in there? The more we can have fairness there, the better. So let's check this out. I want you to get this acronym. What does the S stand for? Status. Don't kick people in the S. Raise the status of the people around you. How about the C? Certainty, that's right. And the A? There you go. And the R? Relatedness, which means get people part of your tribe. How can you be part of that? And then the F? Fairness. That's exactly right. I got to tell you, when you decompose communications that break down, or if you decompose conflict that happens, I see it a lot, and I'd say the S is probably the biggest one that I see there. Okay? Well, it's one thing to go, okay, so that's a cute acronym. I'm going to try to remember that. It's another thing to say, okay, I see this sender-receiver model, but let's say that you've got a pretty tough conversation or some important communication that you have to try to get out. What I'd like to do is to say, well, instead of waiting for Cindy to just retire or get fired or go to another company, what if we could come up with a process? And there's a picture of this process on the back of your gold sheet, but I want to walk through this process because I find it can help when you want to be understood, when you want to try to understand more effectively, consider this process. It starts with the BS. Now, I know what you're thinking that stands for, but it actually stands for break down the scene. Break down the scene. And this comes from just this wonderful lady named Kathy Salett. Kathy is an improv artist based in New York City. She is a musical performer. She also runs a training business, but she wrote a great book called Performance Breakthrough. One of the things that Kathy says is that every interaction is a performance. You might say, every interaction we have is improv. When you walked in today, even if you sat with people from your own company, it was not scripted of what you're saying. It's improv. And what she says is, we're doing improv all the time. Everything that goes on. If you think of it as a performance, if that smacks of insincerity, think about the best intentions of this. In fact, what you could do is you could say, well, if everything is kind of an interaction like that, well, stories have characters. They have settings. They have like these plot lines, and sometimes they kind of recur. So think about these communications that you have. Where do they tend to go sideways, or when do they tend to go south? For example, I've heard some people say, when I'm one-on-one with this person, it's just fine. But if their boss is in the room, it's like they're a whole different person. Or if their boss is on copy. Characters, there's a difference in characters. I've done things at times where I'm like, I need to change the setting here, because if I take them to a Panera or a Starbucks, they're less likely to freak out in public. And so it's a matter of looking at the setting. So take a look at the characters. What is the setting, and how does the plot normally go? All right, so here, let me just give you a little more insight to the Kaufman family. My 17-year-old daughter is probably more of a daddy's girl than a mama's girl, okay? And so the biggest points of tension is often between my wife and her. And so one thing I've noticed, as you break the characters down in the setting, it's usually in the kitchen, After 9 o'clock at night, they're both tired. One says something, the other one takes the bait, and they go back and forth. And so that's how the plot line goes. So once I kind of figured this out, and it's after 9 o'clock, and I see that happen, I'm like, stop! I know where this is going. And they're like, shut up! But I'm telling you, if you look at your communication, look at the characters, what's the setting, how does that setting impact it? How's the plot line normally go? It can give you some insight on how this works. So Mitch Warner works for the Arbinger Institute. Probably the single business book that's impacted me most in the last year is a book called Leadership and Self-Deception. It's been around for a while, millions of copies sold. But it is I'm quite sure I'm a different husband and parent, but it's not like decidedly written specifically for home. It just talks about how self-deceived we are. And one of the things that he says is this blinds us to the true causes of problems. And once we're blind, once we don't see what's really going on, everything we try to do makes it worse. And so, for example, my interactions with Cindy, guess whose fault most of this stuff is? Clearly Cindy's. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I mean, that's like so obvious. Everybody knows that. And so the challenge here, when you're breaking the scene down, is to try to start with you. And so one of the things I try to look for now is, when does my blood pressure really start going up? Or when do I start getting really defensive? Defensiveness is a really good sign that maybe something's going on here that I might be self-deceived or I might be oversimplifying. You see, there's a term up there when we start horribilizing the other person. And that's actually, culturally, that's where we're at right now. Somebody who votes different from you is not just like unwise, they're evil. Right? I mean, if maybe that's not how it is in South Carolina, but if you watch any of the national news, that's kind of how it works. We're definitely in that sort of mode now. And so what this says is, when you're breaking the scene down, where is it I'm starting to get defensive? Where is it that I'm oversimplifying things? I gotta tell you, every one of us who stands up here today, it's so easy for us to start coming up with really simple answers to more complex problems. And you can fall into that trap too. And so I like the way that Donnie Ebenstein says it. It's a really nice book called I Hear You. And one of the things that he says is that have a stance of uncertainty. Cultivate this stance of uncertainty. Okay? So it's good to be confident. In fact, I find a lot of project managers get up their confidence. But there's also something to be said for, you know what? Maybe I don't see it all. Maybe it's not all Cindy here. And if I cultivate that stance of uncertainty, it's so difficult to do. People won't necessarily put you into it. You have to almost put yourself there of saying, I'm willing to do that. So pay attention to the story. When you're breaking it down, what's the story? Almost every story has a hero and a villain. Who's the victim, right? So Cindy is what? She's totally the villain. I'm totally the victim. And if you listen to the story, I'm telling you, you decompose it like that, it's going to help you. So you break the story down. The next one is do no harm. Can I just tell you how important this one is, to do no harm? If you can just take this away from it, that when someone sends you that email, this is that opportunity where we can make things so much worse based on how we respond. A guy named Peter Bregman told me, he goes, if someone ticks you off, whatever medium they sent that message, whether it's face-to-face or email or whatever it was, never reply in that same medium, because we're likely to make it worse. There are so many ways that we can make things worse. This is Tim David, wrote a really good book on influence. This was like 2 or 3 episodes ago that I published this one. But he goes, because the question came up about how do you influence? How do you help somebody when you know it's 8 and no one else does? He says the cardinal rule of influence is to never make the other person feel stupid. Okay? Now, by the way, what is that? What letter is that in SCARF? S, right? And if you do something, and it's so easy for us to do this, we can say something like, well, clearly the, whatever. I mean, in the words we use, the vocal tone, we can do that. And so when it comes to doing no harm, never make the other person feel stupid. In fact, he says it this way: anytime there's even a hint of ingratitude with somebody, if it ever comes off that you're unthankful or something, if there's even a hint of it, forget about it. Okay? So keep that in mind as you're trying to communicate. Celeste Headley has a very popular TED Talk on communicating. It's very effective. It's very natural. And her book is, I'd say watch the TED Talk, not read the book, quite frankly. But one of the things that she says is, sometimes when you're trying to do no harm, you go, well, I'm going to actively listen, right? We were taught this ever since we're kids, actively listen. But one of the things she says is, if you use it as a technique, it comes off as inauthentic. If you're just like, oh, I'm going to give eye contact and nod. She goes, it's inauthentic. So one way to do no harm is just to be present. We have so many distractions, right? Things that are trying to get our attention, like, oh yeah, so I got to do this. So many things are trying to get our attention. So what she would say is just be present. That's one way to do no harm. So one thing to keep in mind is, and this is where project management can really help us, because we are used to, at the beginning of a project, defining success, right? I mean, we all know that a project charter should have some measures of success, or in Agile, we should have definition of done. We should be very clear about this. Same thing in our communication, because this is what I see too often, is we take the bait. We're trying to get this across, and all of a sudden, the way they react, we take the bait, and we chase each other right off a cliff. Don't take the bait. What do I want to make sure we're going to get across here? Okay, if I want my team to get to the $8, great. I'm going to do this in a way that moves us that direction, but I'm not going to make anyone feel stupid as I go through it. I'm going to lift their ass. I'm going to involve people. We are a team. I'm telling you, be very, very careful of taking the bait. And if the idea of the risk management is just thinking, well, what could go wrong? What could go wrong? Too often what I see is people go in and they just like, they just show up and throw up, which is a very provocative way of saying that we're like, I'm ticked. I'm just going to go in and tell them what I think. A guy named Tony Schwartz told me this during an interview. He calls it Tony's rule of triggers. Whenever you feel like you must, don't. You ever find yourself in that situation? Like, well, I just got to say, and whatever even as you're saying it, you're like, I want to get these words back, right? But they are like gone. Or when you hit Alt-S, you go, oh, that felt good for like 5 minutes. And so do no harm. That's what we're trying to do here. Kathy this was actually the most impactful thing for me out of the entire book. She said, every interaction is this opportunity to build relationships or not, is basically what the quote is saying. Now, this may not be obvious, but this is what impacted me on it, is I have a 23-year-old and a 21-year-old, and sometimes people go, hey, Andy, if you could go back and be in your early 20s, would you want to? And my answer is not if I have to be as stupid as I was back then. So there's a lot of things we've learned now that maybe our kids haven't quite learned, and there's times I just want to go, trust me. Like my oldest, when he was 21, he goes, Dad, I don't think I'll ever need a to-do list. I got it right here. And I'm just like, yeah, you're an idiot. No, you need a to-do list, yeah? Right? There's times we say stuff to our kids that we're like, man, I guess I maybe didn't have to say it that way. Or there's times we can do that to a stakeholder. There's times we can do it to a boss. But here's the advice I want to share with you. What if, now this is highly aspirational, but what if we said after every interaction that we have, our relationship is just as good or better? Think about that. Would you speak to a spouse differently, even if you're kind of wired? Would you speak to your kid different? Would you speak to a coworker different? If my goal, now once again, it's highly aspirational. I don't even know if it's humanly possible. But if we went as an aspiration, it says, every interaction, I end well with this person. They're leaving the company, I'm going to make sure my last touch with them is as good as possible. Every interaction, you leave that where it's no worse, because this is do no harm, and maybe even better. It is actually transforming when it comes to communication. We'll be more careful about how we say things. Okay? So we have the start with the BS, the do no harm, and then we have the take two. And what take two is, in this context, is, well, we kind of broke it down into the characters and the setting and kind of how it goes. How do we want to redo it? So let me give you an example of this. All right? So I'm actually far more laid back than you know. So this would be me. At this point, I'm a vice president of systems, and I'm sitting in a meeting with Cindy, and there's actually a fair number of meetings I would kick my shoes off because why not be comfortable? All right? And so I'm cracking jokes during the meeting. Now, Cindy's a pretty hardcore driver. I'm kicked back like this. And what's Cindy, the hardcore driver, thinking about me right about now? Rudy says I'm a slacker. That didn't help my S. No, I'm just kidding. No, but yeah, I think, isn't it fair to say that Cindy's thinking I'm kind of a slacker? Cracking jokes, not understanding the sense of urgency, not hard enough on my teams. I'm being too nice to them. How's the project going? I'm like, it's going fine. You know, Laura's going to share some great ways to communicate status on your project. I needed Laura's class at this time. I'm just like, trust me. Cindy's losing hair right now, right? So what would you coach me to do on my take two? I mean, start with my shoes on. Yeah, good call. Keep my shoes on. Yeah, I mean, put my big boy pants on, you know? I mean, there's times where, do you think it's fair to say that we are betraying our intent based on body language and other stuff? Yeah. I mean, humor works in the workplace often. We actually have some friends who, their daughter is working for the state of Illinois, and her team got in trouble for having too much fun. Yeah. Well, it is Illinois, after all. But, you know, that's ridiculous, right? I mean, to have a team that has good social bonds, there's pretty solid research behind it that a team with strong social bonds is going to perform better. But this is not that moment. When I'm talking with Cindy, I probably ought to be leaning forward. Stop cracking jokes at that moment. Maybe making sure, like, how does she like to be communicated? I learned she liked things in rows and tables. She would love scorecards. She would love, I mean, it took me longer to figure this out than it should have. But I started making some of those changes, and Cindy's like, Andy's coming around. Like, it wasn't us coming around. I was just learning to speak her language. So whether it's face-to-face like this, whether it's via the email, think of the characters, think about, you know, what is the setting? I can think of people, like I said before, you get them off site, that's gonna be a whole different deal. Get them one-on-one, that might be a whole different conversation. Not in the meeting in front of anybody else, because if you can confront them in the meeting, you know, it's not just a millennial thing. We're kind of a snowflake. People are so easily offended today. I just can't imagine how we can be so easily offended. And so it's like, be careful about that. This person in the past, you know, like Peter Bregman told me this. He goes, whenever you find yourself saying, I can't believe they did it again. I can't believe they got offended again. He goes, stop saying you can't believe they did it again. That's what they do. Okay? And so just anticipate it. So you're do no harm. Take two. What do I need to do to be more effective here? Now, what Doug said here is that sometimes just little tweaks give you some influence. I could sit back and be a victim with Cindy, or how about I start sitting up? How about I keep my shoes on? How about I adjust how I communicate? Yeah, that would make a big difference. Now, something that Kathy Salett recommends, and we're actually going to try it here. One of the things she says is, if you want to try to get better at something, just act it out. You can act your way to getting better. I kind of alluded to this before, but probably the single most important thing that I see a lot of project managers could up their game a little bit on is confidence. It's assertiveness, especially because a lot of us became accidental project managers. We were doing this, and like we became a project manager not because we were 9 years old and said, I want to be a project manager or something. Right? I mean, we just kind of evolved into that sort of role. And so a lot of times we're starting to get outside our comfort zone. One of the biggest fears of CEOs in one survey I saw was the imposter syndrome. That a lot of times we feel, we don't say it, but that we feel like, I don't know if I've got what it takes to do it. Especially if I had a boss like Cindy, then all of a sudden they shake your confidence. Maybe you've had that boss before, right? So what Kathy says, you can act your way into being more confident, all right? So I would love a volunteer here. Somebody just willing to have some fun. Thank you. What's your name? Drew? Yeah, come on up. Okay. So first of all, come on, give it up for him. Thank you, man. All right. So let's say that you wanted to up your confidence. Let's just say, and right now might be a really good time for that. But who is somebody like an actor or someone in the public eye that comes to mind as just a really confident person? Like who's somebody that comes to mind?
Gary Sinise.
Gary Sinise, yeah, that's good. Okay, here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to go to the end of the stage over there, walk up the steps like Gary Sinise would walk up the steps. Just walk across the whole way and then back down to your seat table, okay? Let's try it. How would Gary do this?
I mean, without the legs on
Well, yeah, exactly. With legs, yeah. No CG. Oh yeah, come on. I could have swore that was Gary Sinise right there. I could have sworn. Nice job, Drew. Thank you. So
That's it, really?
that was it, yeah. Okay. I recently had somebody go, Denzel Washington. I'm like, okay, girl. You walk across, and she was like, yeah, like, I don't know how Denzel walks, but here, this is actually the point, is that you want to get better at public speaking, you want to get better at negotiating, you want to get better at influence, you want to get better at confidence. Kathy Salet makes a living by helping people act their way to it. And I've seen it work over and over and over. It was only about, maybe 20 years now, so it's been a while. But if I stood in front of 10 people, I couldn't eat or sleep the night before. And now I make a living doing it. Can I tell you, you can build any skill, and one way to do is to act your way into it. So if you feel like, when I'm in that meeting with those senior executives, I just get quiet. Act your way into it, okay? How would Drew do that, Or think of that person that does speak up more often. You can act your way into it. You rehearse it, okay? And then we go to the action. This says, all right, you just try it out. You're like, all right, I'm going to try to be Gary Sinise as I walk into that conference room. I wasn't, I'm still not quite as much as there as I want to get. So you just try it. You just try to iterate. You just try to keep getting better at this. Down at the bottom of the picture, you'll see the let's do lunch, kind of keeping with the movie kind of story theme. And really what that is about is investing in relationships. If you want to improve your ability to be understood, your ability to understand others, the dirty little secret of business is that everything comes down to relationships. Would you buy that? Yep. In many respects, it comes down to relationships. There's like staggeringly depressing research on this. I just last week interviewed Jeffrey Pfeffer. He has a new book coming out late this month called "Dying for a Paycheck," and it's a really good book. But in some of his other research, he talks about person A has work results here, relationship with the boss here. Person B has work results here, relationship with the boss here. Who gets promoted? It's depressing. It's like everything that we should, but I'm telling you, relationships matter so much, not just with the boss, but with the people we're communicating to. If you have a stronger relationship, it's a lot easier to do this communication stuff, right? If you want somebody if you want this to get better, invest in relationships. And Hermione Ibarra, she's consistently on the Thinkers 50 list, which is the top leadership thinkers. She wrote this fabulous book called Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader. And if you're in a relatively new role, or you feel like you're in a role that, am I over my head? Maybe you don't say it that way, but it feels that. It's a great book for that. But one of the things she says in the book related to relationships is that left to our own devices, we build networks that are narcissistic and lazy, which is insulting in two ways. But this kind of gets to the tribal nature. What we do is we build relationships with people that are in at least our Greenville office. Or we build relationships with the other project managers or the people on our team, but we don't go far enough into the organization or outside the organization. There are all kinds of reasons why you should be part of this chapter. If you're here today and you're not part of this chapter, there's all kinds of reasons why you should be part of this. And it's this right here. You need to be networking with far more people than what you do left to your own devices. Right? Because it just feels like we don't have time. This is a forum where you can build, in fact, what she says is too often our relationships are backward focused, who we worked with in the past. Look at your LinkedIn list, primarily the people in the past. She goes, you need to be building relationships with people in the future. That's what you have right here. These are relationships you could be relying on for years, decades ahead, right here in the chapter. So left our own devices, we build relationships with people who vote like us, who are project managers, who think like us, things like that. And she would go to this, be parts of multiple tribes, okay? So think about the relationships. This is the process. Here's what I want us to do. I'm going to give you a scenario. I want you to talk about it at your table. Sam is a project manager that depends on a marketing executive named Martin, okay? Got it? According to Sam, Martin is an idiot. He's a jerk. Completely unreasonable his demands, slow responding to email, overall clueless. That's a direct quote. Interactions often turn into arguments, and Sam needs Martin's sign-off and is dreading. He can't just, on social media, you can unfriend people. At work, you're stuck with them sometimes, right? So we're kind of stuck with this person. We can't unfriend him. And so here's what I want you to do. On your table here, how can Sam make the situation worse? Okay? What could Sam do to make the situation worse? And what recommendations would you have for Sam? Start that conversation around your table. So what could Sam do to make this worse? Let's have some people shout out. Keep asking? Well, you know, it is interesting because in this case, we need the sign off. And sometimes, I mean, you have this, right? You've got a boss sometimes that drags their feet, or somebody that you need their sign off. In this case, it's not a boss, but they're dragging their feet. And if it is something on the critical path, it's going to delay your project. The longer they, tick tock, right?
Assume he's not going to sign it.
Right, so we can jump to conclusions that he's not going to sign it, right? That's something we could clearly do. And so a guy named Alan Cohen wrote a book called Influence Without Authority. His first step in his process is assume all are potential allies. It's hard to think of this person as an ally, but an ally is not a BFF, right? An ally is we have a common goal, common enemy, common something like that, right? All right? So we can make it worse by like, you know what, he's never going to sign off on this. All right, what else? Anything else come to mind? Send more emails, okay? Okay.
Yeah, copying the ball.
All right, so sometimes you copy the boss, and sometimes you do have to escalate, right? I mean, there are times that you have to escalate. After I'm done, after a break, Laura's going to be talking, and Laura had a brilliant post on bullying just in the recent week. You need to sign up for Laura's newsletter. She has some great content, but sometimes you do have to escalate. Sometimes you do have to escalate, but other times, as soon as you do that, you blind somebody. In fact, Alan Cohen says in a book, escalate, but never blindside. Because what Tim David said, that's going to make the person feel stupid. That's going to you go over someone's head without them knowing, it's going to kick them in the ass. All right. So any advice for Sam there?
Be prepared.
Okay, so be prepared, which kind of means do my homework. I can't tell you the number of people that I actually wrote off as jerks, that I was just oversimplifying it. And a lot of times those people who are against our project, at least to them, there's a valid reason why they're against it. And instead of taking the time to really ask the questions and walk in their shoes, so to speak, I was just like, you are an inconvenience to me. That's what I was more coming across as. So spend some time to really understand. Dr. Robert Cialdini, I had him on the podcast regarding his book, Persuasion. He says for people that are especially difficult, what you need to have is more interactions with them, not less. More interaction, but not talking about the points of contention. So I think he might suggest take Martin out for lunch, which might be the best diet program around, but the thought is, and don't talk about the project, don't talk about the sign-off, get to know them, what makes them tick, ask them lots of questions, get that person talking. That'd be a lot more effective. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very insightful. If you weren't able to hear, she said, just find out more. What's going on? Like there's this guy named Mark Goulston. He's a psychiatrist that worked with suicidal people for many years, and he took what he learned there into the workplace of how do you deal with irrational people. And he goes, when someone's acting what seems like irrational and they're just like ranting, what we want to do sometimes, he goes, the worst thing you can say is like, settle down, settle down. It's not that big of a deal because all you did was show how clueless you are. As was wisely said, there's a reason why they're acting that way. It's at least rational to them. So spend time trying to understand, why is it that they're acting that way? There's probably something else. Maybe whip out a little scarf with them. Not, as you analyze it, of like, I wonder if there's something I've done in the past that has kind of hurt that, or what could I do to raise their status? What could I do? Maybe something doesn't feel fair. Maybe we've given them no autonomy. We haven't included them in some of the discussions. Isn't it amazing how one stakeholder can create serious pain on a project? Because maybe we needed their input, or other times because we just didn't kiss their ring. You know what I'm saying? Like they just felt like they were not included. And so all those things could be helpful. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to skip this scenario and just go to a wrap up on this because we've hit a lot of things. You know what? This is a day filled with so much learning. I can't wait for what you guys are going to learn today. And our goal, as David said, is that you're going to take some of these things away and you're going to apply them at work. And tomorrow you're going to walk into an office, or if you work from home, you're going to interact with people virtually that maybe don't look like this. All smiles. Perfectly diverse, by the way. But it's not going to be like, sometimes people go, you don't know what I have to go back to. I have to communicate with people who are far more like Martin than, Kathy Salet. And so there's a former defense secretary who said, you don't go to war with the army that you wish you had. You go to war with the army that you got. Keep that in mind as you go through all the sessions today, okay? Now take what you can, and your goal is to adapt it into that culture. But can I just say this as I get close to ending here? Don't go to war alone. This chapter is filled with people who can help you. There's this unbelievable program called PM in the PM. If you're not part of this, learn more about it at the break. It is an unbelievably good program that you can build relationships with people here. Do it. Don't go to war alone. And can I say this? That what we need to do is, even if we're going back to what feels like the Three Stooges sometimes, break the scene down. Align how you're communicating. Have this goal that, I am going to do everything I can, that when I end these conversations, that our relationship is going to be stronger. Maybe act your way into some things. Take action on these things. Use the richest medium you have available. This is going to make a difference on your projects, on your teams, and your career. Let's go do that. Thank you.